Nicodemus here. On today's podcast, I wanted to go over some questions. So we posted in the A Course of Miracles page. It's on Facebook, has like 50,000 people in it. We got some really good questions. This one was, let's do a podcast on special love versus indiscriminate love and how it relates to marriage, especially if the partner is not on the same page.
Yeah, I get this question a lot, and over the years, I think special love as it relates to, let's say, a special relationship as it relates to a holy relationship. We could do a whole other video on that. And for us, for this conversation, let's keep it really simple. And all of our relationships have the opportunity to be a holy relationship. So, what's a holy relationship? It's a relationship that is whole, that is based on two people coming together and recognizing their wholeness and then extending it and sharing it. Most people come in relationship like there's a lack in me, right? We all grew up with the Hollywood, you complete me. Without you, I'm nothing, or what is my life without you? All that's built on what the Course would call specialness, and this idea that somehow I could find what's missing in me through another. Now, we'll do another podcast on that. We could spend the whole year just talking about that. It's a lot of brilliant distinctions in the Course on special relationships and holy relationships. I think also the second part of the question is, what do we do when we're in a relationship with someone who doesn't necessarily align with these beliefs, or maybe doesn't study the Course? And, how do we navigate in relationship with them? I think the first thing for us to know, especially if you're new in this type of understanding or philosophy, and you really love the Course, what ends up invariably happening for a lot of people is you want to share it. Everybody's got to study this. Everybody's got to experience this. What you'll realize is that in doing that, at first people are, there's a resistance, or there might be pushback, even in your closest relationships. Well, in the Course, let's read a few things here from that Jesus says in the Course. And this is from chapter 2, section 5. And I think this is important for us to understand our relationships. And in the first paragraph, it says, before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world. So what's a miracle worker? Anyone who practices the path of forgiveness, of expressing love, of aligning themselves with the Holy Spirit and bringing that light into the world is a miracle worker. So actually, we're all called to be miracle workers. It's not like Jesus is a miracle worker and you and I are, we're out of luck on that one. It's not like that at all. He says in the manual for teachers, who's a teacher of God? Actually, anyone who chooses to be a teacher of God is a teacher of God. So before miracle workers are ready to undertake their function in this world, it's essential that they fully understand the fear of release. Otherwise, they may unwittingly foster the belief that release is imprisonment, a belief that is already very prevalent. So how does that apply to the people in our lives? Well, the fear of release is deep in us. So actually, if you were to just start talking about the Course or coming to people and wanting to teach them about this, you might actually find resistance in the beginning. Well, why? Because we're afraid of the light. We're afraid of miracles. We're afraid of God in the end. So that's everybody. So just know that let's say in studying the Course or any modality that you're into that's into healing and pushing that on others, there might be resistance. There might be really a deep resistance for people. So first off, understanding the fear of release in people, which gives us compassion and actually translates to the next in paragraph 5, this really, really important distinction in the Course. And this is italicized in this section. It says, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement, the healing for himself. So it really doesn't matter if I try to, get someone else to get it. Actually, that could really work against and be a distraction from me accepting the healing for myself. Our job is to accept the atonement, the healing for ourselves, and then live from that place. And you don't have to talk about Course of Miracles to live from that place. You don't have to get your husband or wife or your kids or anything to understand these distinctions to live from that place. But, and this is important, but they'll see it in your face. They'll see it in your eyes. You'll be at peace. And some people might come to you like, what are you doing? And What is this? I'll tell you quick stories. I was in India in my early 20s, maybe in my late 20s at this time. And I remember somebody there who traveled all around the world and interviewed spiritual teachers. And they actually said this to me. We were having dinner and, they knew my background and a lot of the teachers in India. And they said to me, they said something really interesting. They said, I have to ask you this question. I interview spiritual teachers all around the world. And what is it with the people that study this Course of Miracles that you're talking about? It seems like they have a certain look in their eye, a certain peace. And when that always stuck with me that they said that. And it doesn't mean this is the only way or the best way, but what the Course teaches is the only way. And it can be found through any modality. It could be found through going to church on Sundays and learning about forgiveness. It can be found in loving your husband or wife or your kids. It's found in learning the path of forgiveness. What Jesus says in the Course is that in the end, forgiveness is the only path for us, that all paths end up leading back to God, and they do through forgiveness. So let's go back to this conversation. Is the sole responsibility of the miracle workers to accept the atonement, the healing for themselves, and atonement, at one-ment, healing, the awakening for ourselves. Now, I don't have to push that on to anyone. But it's very important that I live it. And in my living it, that becomes the invitation for others to step into the light, whether they know these distinctions or not. We all can sense love and compassion and forgiveness in our hearts. So that's the first part of it. I want to go here to chapter 9. And this is really important, a really important section. And it says, the correction of error. It says, the alertness of the ego to the errors of other egos is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have you maintain. So us looking for the ego in others is not the kind of vigilance the Holy Spirit would have us maintain. And it goes on, it says, egos are critical in terms of the kind of, quote, sense they stand for. Like, have you noticed we always had the answers for other people's lives? Everybody knows what everyone else should do. But when it comes to their own life, they just keep making the same mistakes over and over. Well, there's a reason for that. We're not designed to point out the errors and be alert to the ego in others. How can I correct the ego in you when I don't even know how to correct it in myself? If I knew how to correct it in myself, I would have corrected it already. But that it keeps showing up shows you and I that there's something else that's needed for our correction. That's the Holy Spirit. That's God. The correction is in us because God placed it there, but it does not come from us. So it's not my job to correct errors in others. Now, that doesn't mean if we bring it to practical, maybe you see someone hurting themselves and, and maybe you're called to say something. But even in that, our approach is a very loving, humble approach, because what we're saying is we're all in the same prison. And I see you struggling, and, you might want to ask them, like, can I support you? Do you want me to share with you what I see? And then when we do that, we do it from a loving place. Now, they might not want that at all. And if that's the case, we get to just love them where they are. My wife always has a saying that, they say in some of the recovery communities, and, that you say it once, it's loving and we care about them. But we say it twice, now we're starting to get control. By the third time we tell them, now we're trying to control their curriculum and their outcome. So it puts us in the correct position, which is one of humility. Because how would I correct the ego in you when I actually need correction within myself? So ultimately it goes on to basically say is that whenever we see error in others, we always want to ask for correction of our own minds, because they're showing us a place within ourselves where we still choose the ego. And you might choose the ego less the more you study this and the more you listen to these videos and apply it and forgive. But still, we're all like children. Think of us like fourth graders, all learning. And no children know how to and no fourth grader knows how to navigate in the world. They have ideas, but that's what they need their parents for. So ultimately, we start to understand that the parent is the Holy Spirit. Our parent is God, and that we're all like children learning to choose again. So we can have compassion for people in our lives and really and meet them where they are. I remember Ken Wapnick said something that when he was alive and said, don't be weird with Course in Miracles. Like, Course in Miracles students will show up at a funeral with a bottle of champagne saying there is no death. The Son of God is real. We're eternal beings. We don't want to do that, because what that does is that generates resistance in others. We want to be so grounded in the healing and in the atonement, the awakening within ourselves, that we can be with anyone where they're at. We can go to a funeral and just say, my condolences for you. And maybe we're led to say, hey, if you want to talk further about this, and if I could support you in any way, let me know. But what we always come back to is the sole responsibility of me is to accept the healing for myself. And then where we started is you see the opportunity for all of the relationships to become holy, to become whole. Because how that occurs is we find the wholeness within ourselves, and then we use the relationship to extend that wholeness, whether the other person recognizes that or not, or is at the level of understanding that you are or not. All that stuff doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, we are all the Christ. We are all a child of God, and everybody deserves love. And what he says in the course is everyone's right because they're a son of God. If they're speaking from their ego, they're never right, but it's not up to you and I to correct them, because when we correct them, we're telling them that they're wrong. It's up, they need correction at another level, and the correction always comes from the Holy Spirit. So actually, a simple thing that you could practice is if you're ever in a relationship and you feel that, or you want to share this and there's resistance, or maybe they're in their ego and suffering and anger, and whenever that shows up, can we step back and just ask the Holy Spirit for guidance and correction, not just for their minds, but for their minds, your mind, my mind, and all of our minds. And then what you start to realize is relationships get simpler and simpler when all we use them for is to extend love, and not to try to change anyone or not to have anyone get it, but we use it as a grounds to extend the love that comes from us choosing the atonement and the healing for ourselves.